This is the original box art for Sons of Liberty when it came out on the PS2. And this is the back of the box. I share both of these mostly to provide some context for those who weren't playing games at the time. People thought we were getting a new Solid Snake adventure, and that's exactly what they got for the first hour or two of the game. As I said in the last part of this series, this is exactly what fans were expecting, and it's exactly what they wanted. The fact that the tanker mission with Snake turned out to be one of the best gaming sequences of all time left people at the time reeling with excitement. The game was living up to the hype. You need to know this, because what comes next had people in a frenzy. You learned that the tanker mission was just an intro to the game, and the main game was going to take place on the Big Shell, and you were going to be controlling a series newcomer, Raiden. Raiden is a big change from Solid Snake. He's much less the manly man veteran that Snake is. He's much younger and much less experienced. All the while, his long, bleach blonde hair and baby face are a far cry from the scruffy Snake we're used to. I think the gaming audience was less mature in 2001, and because of that, people took this character to be uninteresting, whiny, and gay for some reason. I can't really argue with you about whether or not he's interesting, but I would happily argue about his whininess and sexual orientation. I'm not going to spend much time on that because these have been talked to death, and this is my video. I think that Raiden is a good addition to the Metal Gear Solid series, a series which has had a gruff old dude as the hero in basically every other game. I love the series to death, but I appreciate the change of pace here. But Raiden isn't interesting just because he's different. I think he's interesting because he's an effective window into the world for the player. We'll get into this more as the game goes on, but Sons of Liberty is very much a game about simulation and identity, and Raiden is a spot-on avatar for us as players from the very beginning. He's young and eager to get going, he wants to prove himself, and due to his playing of many simulated military exercises, is supremely confident in his ability to do anything put in front of him. He thinks he can do anything because he participated in countless VR exercises that were indistinguishable from reality. If that's not precisely what we're doing in video games, such as Metal Gear Solid, without VR goggles and stuff, I don't know what is. He even references doing the tanker mission in VR, which almost leads me to believe that we weren't even playing as Solid Snake at the start of the game. We were playing as Raiden playing as Snake. I don't think that is the case because we see Olga later in the segment, and Raiden has no idea who she is, which doesn't quite follow, but it's an interesting idea.
Any field experience?
No, not really.
So this is your first.
I've had extensive training, the kind that's indistinguishable from the real thing.
Like what?
Sneaking mission 60, weapons 80, advanced,
VR, huh?
but realistic in every way.
A virtual grunt of the digital age, that's just great.
That's far more effective than live exercises.
You don't get injured in VR, do you? Every year a few soldiers die in field exercises.
There's pain sensation in VR and even a sense of reality and urgency. The only difference is it isn't actually happening.
That's the way they want you to think, to remove you from the fear that goes with battle situations. War is a video game. What better way to raise the ultimate soldier?
But anyway, Raiden is a little cocky and ready to take on the world. This segment kicks off very, very similarly to the original Metal Gear Solid game, as Raiden swims into an enemy-controlled base, learns the basic rules of sneaking in a small room, and then takes a long elevator up where he removes his swimwear and shows his face for the first time. The little details from the tanker section continue here as well, as the roof is designed in a way that seems intent on making it a little unclear exactly how you're supposed to get out of there. There's a bit of open fence that you can crawl through, but it's hard to see on an HD screen, let alone a 480i screen that most people were playing this on at the time. Because of this, you'll wander around for a minute or so, and you're bound to find one of the fun details in this simple little room. If you run over the bird poop, you'll slip and fall. If you look up into the sky, a bird might crap on your face. And if that bothers you, you can shoot one of those birds with the tranquilizer and see it spiral down to the ground. When it's down, you can even look up close to see that your tranq dart is stuck in the bird exactly where you hit it. This holds true for enemies throughout the game as well. It's a really cool detail, being able to see where you hit them. Again, I think this sort of stuff is really cool and makes the game feel very tangible in a way that not a lot of games achieve. But very soon after figuring out how to get off the rooftop, you'll start to feel my major frustration with this segment of the game, codec calls. During this segment of the game, I felt like I could take just 4 steps and then be interrupted by a codec call. When the call ended, I'd take a few more steps and sit through another one. All I wanted to do was get some momentum going, and I would be interrupted constantly by Campbell. Get to a new room, get a call. See an enemy, get a call. Find a new item, get a call. You get it. I'd be more accepting of these calls if they had more substance to them, but they're mostly just adding color to the game world. I appreciate them in that regard, as I think this world is delicious, but I got to the point where I'd groan every time a new call came in. So we get on with it and do a little casual sneaking, and we get to the next major story beat when we come across a bloody hallway, again a blatant callback to the previous game, and we meet Vamp and someone who calls himself Iroquois Pliskin, but it's oh so obviously Snake. Raiden has no idea who this guy is, but we immediately know who he is ourselves. What's his game here? We have no idea. All we know is he's willing to team up, and as a player, we're just happy to see Solid Snake back in the fold. Soon, we're on to our first unexpected objective on the Big Shell. We meet Peter Stillman and find out that someone named Fatman has planted bombs all over the Big Shell, and we need to disarm them with what else? Coolant. We need to freeze the bombs to make sure the Big Shell doesn't sink into the bottom of the ocean. Snake takes one half of Big Shell, and Raiden takes the other. The mission does a good job of making you get familiar with each strut in the Big Shell, which is going to pay dividends later in the game. The 6 struts you have access to now are relatively simple, and you very quickly get a feel for their layouts and obstacles. The Big Shell looks very samey in many ways, so it's to the game's credit that it makes the 6 initial struts feel instantly familiar, even with just 1 or 2 visits. In the middle of defusing the 6 bombs you've been tasked with, you run into Fortune, another new villain who appears to be invincible. Bullets curve around her as she begs for someone, anyone, to please kill her. Your first run-in with her has her standing by as a whole SEAL team tries to take her out, but fails. And then she destroys them after expressing her disappointment. The next time you run into her is a one-on-one situation where she initially mistakes you for someone else. We're not quite sure who, but it doesn't quite matter as she starts unleashing a lightning gun on you. Her health bar is very tiny, but it doesn't matter as you can't do any damage to her anyway. All you can do is survive as she destroys the room around you. This isn't my favorite boss fight, and once you realize you can't hurt her, it's just a waiting game. It gets pretty easy to just run and flip around the room until the fight is declared over by a cutscene. Long story short, you try to shoot her one more time and the bullet curves around her and hits Vamp right between the eyes. I actually found this scene rather emotional. The actress playing Fortune delivers a strong performance, and you can really feel the sadness in her as she watches yet another of her friends, comrades, allies? I don't know, fall at her side.
Vamp, are you gone? No, that death was meant for me. Why am I the only one that can't die? Alone again? Cheated out of death again? How long will you force me to live?
It's not something I can personally relate to, but the feeling that it's not fair that you survived while others around you, whether it be in war or just growing old, is a certain type of hell. Fortune's story is still very vague, but at this point I feel totally on board with the character, and while I have no idea how to resolve the situation, I sympathize with her plight. You find out you've been played by Fatman, and this whole bomb disposal thing has been a setup set by him, which ultimately was the trigger to start a timer on the real bomb. Stillman realizes this too late, and he's killed in the middle of a codec call by one of Fatman's bombs. And then you have one objective: find this last bomb and take care of it. You find the last bomb on the heliport, and as soon as you defuse it, you get introduced to the boss, who I find to be the least intimidating in the entire game. Yes, it's Fatman, and I really don't know about this guy. He's in full bomb disposal getup, which I'm on board with, but then he's holding a glass of fine wine and rollerblading around the roof. I can't think of a more lighthearted boss in the franchise, and I honestly don't know how I really feel about him. It's a weird dichotomy, and it reminds me of a Joker-style villain who puts a silly face on top of a truly psychopathic personality. It just doesn't land with me terribly well. He shows up and is dead so quickly that I didn't get a chance to get as invested in him as all of the other bosses in the game. The mechanics of the fight with Fatman are much more enjoyable, though. It's still not horribly difficult, but it does make you think on your feet a little bit, as Fatman will set bombs throughout the fight, and you need to balance doing damage to him and freezing all of the short fuse bombs. I also like that you can't really just shoot him from afar. You need to knock him down so you can get a clean shot at his exposed head. The tension of not getting shot by him, figuring out how you can catch up to him since he's quicker than you, since he's on rollerblades, knocking him down, taking shots when they open up, and defusing bombs all adds up to a boss fight that I enjoyed quite a bit. The fight does a good job of taking many of the things the game has taught you to this point and making you do them in quick succession under a time crunch. It's just like the first fight with Olga in that way, but it's got a little bit more complexity and challenge, which I enjoy. And taking down Fatman brings us to the end of this segment of the game. I would say that this section is quite the come down from the tanker mission. It's not as thrilling and the tone has changed quite a bit. If I didn't know where this was going, I'd say this was way too similar to the PS1 Metal Gear Solid opening. But as we'll talk about more and more as the game goes on, that is very intentional and kind of the entire point of the game. I think that Raiden is doing a good job of being the new lead so far, and I'm completely on board with him being the main character. I could stand a few fewer codec calls with him and Rose asking him if he can remember what tomorrow is, though.
Jack, do you remember what day tomorrow is?
That again. I'm sorry, but I still don't have a clue.
That's okay.
I'm super impressed with the world building that's going on in this game. I already feel like I know the Big Show like the back of my hand, and almost every character I come across has either a compelling backstory or a compellingly mysterious story. It's also been well over a decade since I've played this game, and I'm struck by how accurate the designs of Fortune, Fatman, and Vamp are in my memory. It's a testament to their designs that they stuck with me all this time. The main objective keeps shifting, and there are tons of priorities, from saving the president, to defusing the bombs, to rescuing the hostages. And while I don't love sitting through coda conversations, they're proving very well done and make sure that I always know what the current objective is. This could all be very confusing, but they're doing a wonderful job of breaking things down into digestible chunks. Don't worry though, the game has plenty of time to get downright insane. And that's where I'll leave this section. After the big opening on the tanker, this section slowed things down a little and is just starting to ramp them back up again. I genuinely don't remember what comes next in the game, so I'm looking forward to seeing if this crescendo continues into the next segment. If you liked the video, please give it a like below and subscribe if you want to know when the next video lands. Thank you so much for watching.